everyone, Owlvine here. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about coven versus solitary witchcraft and that practice and what's involved and how it's different and pros and cons and different things like that, right? This was sparked by a comment that I received recently. So it got my brain cogs turning and I wanted to share some of that with you. So I actually have 2 videos on my channel already that this video relates to. Now, the first one is called The Struggles of Being Solitary or something like that, which I'll link down below. And the other one is Coven vs. Solitary, my first coven experience, which I will also link down below if you haven't seen those and want to check them out. So in the last week or so, I received a comment on each of those videos from the same person, and the first one was that this person had watched the solitary video and it had just touched them so much, and you know, they felt a real kinship and a relation to what I had said, a resonance with what I'd said in that video. And then right after that, they'd found this coven video and were like, well, hang on a second, wait, are you solitary or are you in a coven? I think this person felt almost a little bit betrayed by you know, finding such resonance, you know, with me being solitary and then saying, actually, you know, I've joined this coven. And they were going, well, like, I thought we had so much in common and I thought you really understood where I was coming from in all of this. And now it's kind of like you've gone off into this other thing. So I think there was a level of betrayal there. I mean, betrayal is a very strong word, but you know, that level of like, oh, like, you know, I thought we were like samesies and now we're not, like, what's going on here? So I wanted to chat about this today because I think there's a lot of like amazing and crazy and huge ideas out there about what being in a coven is actually like. Now, firstly, I'll say that every coven is very different. You know, this is all down to group dynamics and how things are run and what's focused on and all that kind of stuff. But the first thing that I have definitely experienced and noticed and believed to be true of anyone within a coven, again, it depends on the person's personal practice, but whether we're in a coven or not, we are all solitary practitioners. We all have our own practice. We all have the things that we do outside of group. So it's kind of like going to church, you know what I mean? Like you go to church on a Sunday and you're there with those people and you have that experience, but what are you doing throughout the week? Is your only experience of your spirituality or your magic, whatever, within group space, or you know, does it come into your daily life? Does it come into your life elsewhere? And I would say that for most people who are practicing within a coven, that yes, it does come in other places. They do their own spell work. They have their own time where they connect with spirit and deity, where they do their, you know, sacred self-development and all that kind of stuff. So that is very separate from coven space. So no matter whether we are in a coven or we are solitary, we are all actually solitary practitioners. We all have that element of alone, of being completely solitary. So in this, we all have that kinship. We all have this similarity. Each of our practices is so uniquely different. Like there are as many ways to practice witchcraft as there are witches out there, or whatever name that someone will call themselves. Let's say magical practitioners instead, because that's like even more of an umbrella. We all practice so differently, right? But we all have similarities as well. Now, we're all also looking for community. I think that, you know, the fact that, you know, we're here in this space on YouTube, you know, making videos, watching videos, you know, is a testament to the fact that we are so hungry for community, you know, and I've heard that so much. I felt it myself when I first came into YouTube. When you find someone else who, you know, you feel like you can relate to and is kind of on the same wavelength and going in the same direction in life, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. Wow, this is such an amazing feeling. And I love this, you know. There certainly are witches out there who are completely autonomous, who have no connection to anyone else who does magic or anything like that, and they are just completely 100%, you know, fringes of society doing their own thing, right? But mostly that is not the case. Mostly we know at least someone else somewhere. The internet has just changed the game with this. You know, it's so easy to find people to connect with, you know, to to watch YouTube videos and to have some level of community, if you will. We are human, and humans need other people. Like, we just have this innate thing where we need connection. We need connection with other. And we can have that connection through non-people, but there is definitely a different level of connection when we have it with somebody else, another person. So we all have that drive within us, that desire to connect. And I think particularly when you find a new interest and it just becomes your world, you know, and it's your passion, and you're like, oh, you know, you want to find other people that you can share that with. And that's what we have here in the online space. I think there are absolutely differences to being in a physical group, to physically connecting with people, than to doing it online, but it has similarities as well. It still does have connection. It may be of a different level, but it's still absolutely there. So while maybe most of you who watch me are solitary, there is a level of covenistic, you know, energy happening here as well. Again, it's different to being in an actual coven, and every coven is different in how they do things, but we have that level of connection here. So there is, again, that echo of being in a coven when connecting in online space like this. Now, we all experience groups very differently as well. I tend to, as I was thinking about this, I look back at the patterns of my life, and I tend to be a group outlier. So I'm usually like, you know, quite close with like one, maybe two people within the group. And, you know, with everyone else, I'm just kind of like, it's sort of more acquaintancy, you know. It sort of tends to be how I operate, and I tend to kind of just stay on the edges a little bit of a group. And I've definitely done that so far with the coven that I'm involved in as well. So I think an experience of someone being in a coven is going to be different for the individual depending on how they operate within a group. Whether they fully immerse themselves in it and just like connect with everyone and, you know, do all the things together and spend a lot of time with other people and that sort of thing, to someone who perhaps is a little bit more like me, where it's kind of like outlier, you know, go sometimes and be with people and love that, but mostly kind of not really deeply immersed within the group, but kind of mostly doing their own thing. Now we come to our pros and cons section. So some of the pros of being in a coven are having those relationships. They provide support and obviously connection as well. They can also create accelerated learning. So when we learn on our own, we learn at a certain pace, but when we're surrounded by other people, sometimes that can accelerate our growth because we're getting different input. We're getting all this other input. Also, being within a group does create a level of discomfort. So it creates a little bit of tension so that we are forced to get outside of ourselves and to maybe shape shift a little bit and you know, learn new things that way. It also brings variety too. So instead of just, you know, our own specific interests, you know, this is just what I'm focusing on right now, we have the input from others and we get that variety there too. Now the cons for coven, I think really depend on the coven. It depends on how they're run, it depends on who's in them, it depends on how we personally relate to the people within the group and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is a very personal thing, you know, for each person and each coven. In my coven, I haven't found any cons yet. You know, there's been nothing that has turned me off or been an issue for me or anything like that. So I don't actually have any specific cons to my coven. Now, I'm not forced to practice any certain way with my coven. I don't have to be there if I don't want to be there. All that sort of thing. So it's very flexible, which works for me very well and works for the other members very well. So there isn't that like forceful nature to it and like you have to do things this way and that way. And I guess that can be a con of covens if they have that kind of dynamic. If they have that certain thing to it, that could be a con. Although having something that is so structured and something that you stick to like that also has its pros. So it really depends on the coven as to what the things that aren't so great are. Now, the big pro of being solitary, of course, is that things are 100% your way 100% of the time. You don't answer to anyone else ever. You're not affected by anyone else ever. You close the door, you do your thing, and it's just you on your own doing the things that you want to do. Now, the cons to being a solitary are that you have less support. So you don't have, you know, all those people around you to kind of boost you up whenever you need it. But again, we kind of have this, you know, online coven-esque-ish thing happening where we can actually make friends and have that support and kind of get that happening as well. And the other biggest con I've found of being a solitary is that you rely on yourself 100% for your motivation. So a lot of us have this issue where, you know, we want to dive in more, we want to learn more, we want to immerse ourselves in magic, but we're kind of like, oh, you know, there's all these other things that I could or should be doing. And we really have to be strong within ourselves to like forge ahead and like do that. So in a coven situation, we have a little bit more accountability there, where we can actually, you know, use that accountability and be like, well, I want to be doing all this stuff, so help me, people, you know, help me by keeping me accountable so I can go ahead and do this stuff. So that's one of the cons of being a solitary as well, is that you do have to rely 100% on yourself. Now, I just want to stress that it is absolutely wonderful and perfect to be a solitary practitioner, as it is absolutely wonderful and perfect to be in a coven. There are pros and cons to each. Those were just a couple that I could kind of think of off the top of my head, but there are pros and cons to each, and each person will fit differently within different groups. Now, if you have had negative coven experiences, do remember that every group is different. Every person is different. When people come together, they're different together. So if you haven't found a coven that is right for you, that is a really good fit, but you're really wanting one, keep searching, because there is 100% there will be one out there for you that just is the perfect, wonderful fit that will help get you where it is you want to go, or will help give you what it is you're looking for, you know, whether that be connection or motivation, support, whatever it is that you're looking for. There is one out there for you. Now, it can be a little bit of a task to find covens. What I would suggest doing is going to meetups, going to pagan pride events, going to markets, going, you know, alternative places, maybe sort of hippie-ish places. I know we have a few markets around Melbourne that are like that. St Andrews is one of my favorites. And connect with people who are on the alternative side. You know, visit metaphysical shops and ask around. Ask people, look at notices, all this kind of stuff. Being online today makes it so much easier to find groups out there. So keep searching, keep looking around. Go and physically meet people as well. Like, have the courage to go out there, put yourself out there and go and meet people. There are so many amazing people out there. You may even find that, you know, you don't find a specific, you know, a coven set up for yourself, but you find a group of people who you love hanging out with, who you kind of dabble in magic with, or just talk about magic with sometimes, who end up being like a coven for you. So this is just a little bit on being in a coven versus being a solitary practitioner, and how we're probably not so different from each other. There are a few aspects that are different, but ultimately we are all our own witch. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic as well, so please leave any comments you have down below. And I have a question for you. I am wondering, what is your favorite aspect of your craft right now? What are you loving learning about? What are you loving doing? Are you doing it in a coven? Are you doing it with other people, or are you doing it on your own? Leave your answer down below. I would love to hear from you. And I will see you in the very next video. Sending you so much love and many, many blessings.